Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired firefighter's quiet life in a suburban paradise is shattered by a tyrannical HOA president, he faces fines, fake liens, and legal threats. But when she calls the cops on him during his move, she doesn't expect the responding officer to be his own son. Let the battle begin. I've always been the type of man who minds his own business. Spent over 30 years fighting fires and crawling through wrecks to drag people out, and I never once asked more of the world than a quiet porch and a hot cup of black coffee in the morning. That's why I chose Golden Juniper Estates when my wife and I were ready to settle down for good. Back then, it was peaceful, clean sidewalks, tidy lawns, neighbors who'd wave and mean it. After she passed, I stayed. 14 years total. It was home, or at least it used to be. Everything changed about 8 months ago when a new HOA president took over, Karen Latz. She swooped in like she was running for office in a police state, not overseeing a cul-de-sac of retirees and working families. Blonde, sharp-shouldered, and always carrying that little leather folder like she was about to audit your soul. Claimed she used to be a corporate accountant. I believe it. She came in promising revitalization, community standards, and restoration of neighborhood excellence. What we got was a never-ending wave of petty mandates, outrageous fines, and mandatory meetings that felt more like parole check-ins. She started small, a warning about my garden hose being left uncoiled on the side of my house, then a notice about the condensation pipe under my HVAC unit dripping improperly. I laughed at first, thought it was just her feeling things out. But then she fined the Barkers next door $200 because their grandson parked his car facing the wrong way on the curb during a visit. I stopped laughing real fast. By spring, things had gone off the rails. Karen issued an updated code of conduct that was thicker than most tax returns. New rules included mandatory reporting of all overnight guests, HOA approval required before moving furniture out to the curb, no wind chimes over a certain decibel level, and a requirement that all residents attend quarterly compliance meetings in Pursoon. No virtual excuses. Miss one and you'd be fined. Miss two and your privileges to use community services like the mailbox gazebo or dog path were suspended. You think I'm kidding? I wish I was. I tried to stay off her radar, didn't stir trouble. Paid my dues, mowed my lawn, didn't hang flags or leave my trash can out past noon. But when she sent a formal letter accusing me of unreported vehicle movement because I'd moved an old recliner into my pickup bed before donating it, I knew this wasn't going to stop. The final straw was the HOA summons over unauthorized consumption of shared foliage. I'd picked strawberries from the garden I'd planted behind my fence a decade ago. Apparently, because it was visible from the sidewalk, she claimed it was communal space. I didn't know whether to laugh or choke. I sent her a copy of the plat map with the boundary lines circled just to be petty. She responded with a warning that future hostile documentation would be noted in my permanent HOA record. It was time. I'd been thinking about getting out for a while, browsing Zillow late at night. Then I found it. 40 minutes west, a tidy little house tucked into the piney ridges, no neighbors, no sidewalks, no HOA. Just a gravel driveway, a 2-bedroom log cabin, and a shed out back that I could turn into a workshop. I made an offer the next morning. Once I had the purchase agreement signed, I got serious. I put my house on the market, sold it within a week, and began packing up. I filed the proper HOA notice of departure, sent via certified mail, and dropped a copy in their Dropbox too. I filled out their resident exit form, even though it asked for things like reason for departure and final community feedback. I wrote one word: escape. It was early June when the moving date was set. I scheduled a professional company, veteran-owned, just like me, and cleared the date with the buyers. Everything was legal, above board, neat. No debts, no unpaid dues. I was ready to leave this HOA hell behind and breathe real air again. But I had this tickle in my gut that told me Karen wouldn't let me go without one last power trip. That woman treated this neighborhood like it was her little kingdom. And me. I was just another one of her subjects trying to break the leash. The morning of the move started like any other, except this time I woke up knowing that by nightfall I'd be in a new home, a new life, away from all of this HOA nonsense. The sun was barely up when I had my first cup of coffee on the porch. I sat there quietly, watching the moving truck ease its way down the street like a steel whale gliding between coral reefs. The driver gave a respectful nod as he parked. These guys were pros. No fuss, no attitude, just boots on the ground and boxes in hand. I'd spent the previous week carefully organizing everything. All my papers were in a folder, including the closing documents for the house sale, confirmation of HOA fee clearance, the exit form I had submitted, and receipts going back 2 years just in case someone got creative. I wasn't taking chances. I even printed out a copy of the property line survey and highlighted it in neon green. Not that I expected to need it, but knowing Karen, I figured it couldn't hurt to be over-prepared. By 9, the movers were inside wrapping up furniture, and I was helping haul lighter stuff. My toolbox, some gardening gear, a few crates of books that had gathered more dust than I cared to admit. The buyers of the house were due the next day for their final walkthrough and key exchange. Everything was signed and ready. Legally speaking, this was no longer HOA business. I was on my way out, plain and simple. That's when I heard the familiar sound of low heels scraping concrete. I looked up and saw her marching toward my house like a prosecutor heading for a hostile witness, Karen Latz, clipboard in hand. Flanked by 2 HOA board members, Alan, a retired dentist with a trembling voice, and Denise, a woman who always looked like she was holding in a sneeze. Karen didn't say good morning. She didn't ask if I needed help. She held up her phone and immediately began filming. "Mr. Bennett," she said loudly like I was a child caught shoplifting, "you are in violation of Article 6, Section 3 of the Golden Juniper Covenant regarding unsanctioned removal of property. You were required to submit a clearance report 72 hours before any major object leaves the premises." I stood there blinking at her like she'd just spoken Latin. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm quite serious. You failed to notify the board of your intent to remove what appears to be fixtures of community value. That includes the hedgerow lining your east fence and the decorative stone near the mailbox. Both fall under HOA landscape jurisdiction." "The shrubs?" I asked. "The ones I planted with my own hands 10 years ago? They were visible from the sidewalk and enhanced the neighborhood's overall aesthetic. Therefore, communal contribution." I almost laughed. Almost. "I sold the house, Karen. The paperwork's filed. I'm not your problem anymore." "Incorrect. Until final transfer is recorded with the HOA registrar and clearance is granted, you remain under covenant jurisdiction. There is no registrar. You made that title up. Obstruction of HOA procedure will be noted." She then turned to the movers and began shouting at them not to touch another box until a full assessment had been completed. The workers looked at me, clearly confused. I shook my head and told them to keep going. Karen got louder, repeating that she had legal authority to halt the move. One of her little hench people, Alan, tried to step in front of the dolly as a man wheeled out my dining table. That's when Karen pulled out her phone again, not to film this time, but to dial. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough to get the picture. Attempting to remove restricted HOA property, aggressive, refuses compliance, immediate response needed. She had called the police. I went back to my porch, poured myself another cup of coffee, watched as the moving guys carefully carried out my couch, pretending not to notice Karen screaming about neighborhood assets and protocol violations. I didn't say a word. If she wanted to involve law enforcement, fine. I had every document, every receipt, every email. I wasn't worried, but I'll admit, a small part of me started to wonder who would show up. The department had a decent rotation, but I hadn't told anyone at work about the move. Not even Jacob. I didn't have to wonder for long. About 15 minutes later, I heard the low growl of a police cruiser approaching. I didn't stand up when I heard the cruiser. I just sat there on the porch, coffee in hand, watching it roll slowly toward my house like a storm cloud on wheels. Karen stopped pacing mid-rant, straightened her spine like she was about to be knighted, and waved her arms dramatically in the air as the car pulled up. "Over here," she shouted. "Right here. This is the scene." The cruiser parked across the street. The door opened, and out stepped my son. Jacob had that same unhurried walk he always did. Confident, steady, calm. Sunglasses, patrol cap tucked under his arm, clipboard already in hand. He didn't even look at Karen. His eyes landed on me, and I could see the flicker of confusion turn into recognition. Then he smiled. "Morning, Dad," he said, climbing the steps. "You all right?" I raised my mug. "Never better." Karen blinked like her brain had skipped a frame. Wait a second. You two, this is a conflict of interest." Jacob turned to her, finally acknowledging her presence. "And you are?" Karen Latz, president of the Golden Juniper Estates Homeowners Association. Well, Miss Latz, I was dispatched here on a 911 call regarding suspected theft, obstruction, and hostile behavior. Are you the reporting party? Yes, and he, she pointed a stiff finger at me like I was about to burst into flames, is the suspect. Jacob didn't flinch. All right, let's keep things calm and professional. I'm going to need statements from all involved parties, and I'll start by verifying documentation. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're not seriously going to be involved in this case. He's your father. I'm the responding officer, Jacob said evenly. And unless you're requesting an internal recusal through department channels, I suggest you cooperate. That shut her up. Briefly, we moved inside, where Jacob asked for any documents related to the sale, HOA correspondence, and the move. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, nodding occasionally. Deed transfer signed, sale finalized with county recorder, HOA exit form filed, and time-stamped. He whistled. You've got everything but a notarized farewell poem. Karen, standing behind him like a kettle on the verge of screaming, snapped. He's removing community assets. The hedges, the mailbox stone, those were not approved for relocation. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Mailbox stone? Yes, it anchors the visual aesthetic of the southern corridor. Jacob looked at me. Is this the rock next to the mailbox with a gnome sitting on it? I nodded. Yup, got it from a landscaping yard for $30. Thought the gnome was funny. Jacob wrote something in his notebook and kept moving. One of the movers quietly tapped my shoulder and asked if they could keep loading. I told him yes. Karen shrieked behind us that no one was to touch anything until a full HOA inspection was performed. Jacob turned to her and said flatly, Ma'am, you are not a code enforcement officer. This is a civil matter, and unless you're alleging a crime, I advise you to stand back. That was the moment it shifted. Karen's face flushed deep red. This is unacceptable, she snapped. You're covering for him. You're not impartial. This entire response is a sham. Jacob stayed calm. Miss Latz, if you believe this situation requires review, you're welcome to file a complaint. Right now, I'm investigating a report of potential criminal behavior, and everything I'm seeing suggests this is a lawful move, supported by complete documentation. Do you have any evidence otherwise? She didn't. But that didn't stop her from trying. She pointed to the downed cable line hanging near the garage and said I'd damaged community infrastructure. I told Jacob she yanked it herself earlier, shouting something about how I was stealing HOA bandwidth, which, by the way, is not a thing. Jacob turned to the movers and asked if any of them had video. One of them nodded and pulled out his phone. The clip showed Karen storming up, yanking the cable free, then accusing them of trespassing. Jacob watched the whole thing in silence. All right, he said. That helps. Karen's expression was rapidly melting from righteous fury into unhinged desperation. She paced in a tight circle, muttering about bylaws and emergency powers, claiming that the HOA had legal authority to delay any resident's exit until property audits were complete. Jacob asked for a copy of that bylaw. She said it was under internal review. He marked that as not provided. I watched it all with this strange mix of disbelief and bitter amusement. My kid, my son, had stepped into a hornet's nest and handled it like it was just another Tuesday. Calm, sharp, no theatrics, just facts. But I could see it building in Karen. The way her voice got higher, the way her hands kept twitching toward her phone, the way she couldn't stop pacing. She wasn't done. Not even close. Karen Latz had always been wound tight, but now, watching her spiral in real time, I realized she wasn't just controlling, she was a damn ticking time bomb. Jacob was still calmly reviewing the paperwork when she snapped. She lunged forward without warning, grabbing for the folder in his hands, not with hesitation, like she was snatching a purse from a stranger. Jacob pivoted instantly, tucking the documents to his side and stepping back. Ma'am, he said firmly, do not touch me. You're hiding evidence, she shrieked, eyes wild. You're interfering with an active HOA inspection. This is obstruction. Jacob held up his free hand. Step back. Now. But Karen didn't. She came at him again, faster this time, her face flushed, mouth twisted in fury. She slapped at the folder, then raised the oversized faux leather tote she always carried, one of those obnoxiously large bags stuffed with binders, tablets, and God knows what else, and swung it straight at his chest. It landed with a dull whoomp against his vest. That was it. Jacob didn't hesitate. "You're under arrest," he said with that same even tone he used back when I caught him wrestling with his older cousins as a kid. "Turn around." "Hands behind your back." Karen froze for half a second, then screamed, "You can't arrest me! I'm the president of this community." "You assaulted a police officer," he said, stepping forward. "And you're interfering with an investigation." She tried to back away, yelling, "This is unlawful detainment. I have legal immunity as an HOA executive." Jacob wasn't having it. He reached for her wrists and she jerked, flailing like a raccoon in a trash bin. One of her shoes flew off as he got the cuffs on. The two board members, Alan and Denise, looked like they wanted to melt into the pavement. Alan made a noise like a dying ferret and wandered toward the sidewalk. Denise actually pulled out her phone and started texting someone, probably her yoga group. Karen was still screaming as Jacob guided her down the walkway. "This is a mistake. You're going to lose your badge. I'll sue this whole town." A few of the movers stopped what they were doing to watch. One of them muttered, "Holy crap," under his breath. Another said, "Dude, is that your mom or something?" I shook my head. "HOA president." The third guy laughed. "This is better than court TV." Jacob placed Karen in the back of the cruiser with methodical calm. She was still shouting, now switching to phrases like civil liability, police misconduct, and national scandal. It was like watching someone channel every YouTube sovereign citizen video at once. Once she was in, Jacob closed the door, turned to me, and said, "You good?" I nodded. "Yeah." "Want to press charges for the attempted assault?" I thought about it. "Let's see how the rest of this goes." Jacob scribbled something in his notebook, then turned to Alan and Denise. "Do either of you want to provide a witness statement?" Alan gave a tiny shake of his head and whispered, "I'm just a volunteer." Denise stared at the ground and murmured, "I was never here." Jacob sighed. "Figures." He radioed dispatch, reported the arrest, and got confirmation that a second unit would meet him at the station for processing. Then he came back over to the porch and leaned against the rail beside me. "She always like this?" he asked. I sipped my coffee. "Only when she's awake." He smirked. "Jesus." Karen's shrieking had dulled to background noise inside the cruiser. I could see her still trying to wriggle around in the back seat, her giant tote now sitting next to her like a mute accomplice. The movers resumed their work. With the chaos gone, things moved quickly. My dresser came out, then the kitchen table, then the last of the boxes. A breeze picked up, rustling the leaves. For a moment, everything felt normal again. But I knew that was temporary. Karen might be in cuffs, but something told me this was just the beginning of the storm. By the time Jacob drove off with Karen still barking from the back seat like a rabid dog on a leash, the sun was nearing its peak. The neighborhood felt eerily quiet, like it wasn't sure whether it should return to business as usual or wait for the sequel. The movers had picked up the pace, eager to finish and get the hell out of Golden Juniper Estates. I couldn't blame them. I stood on the porch, still holding my half-empty mug, wondering just how far the madness might stretch. I figured that once Karen cooled off in a holding cell, things would go back to normal. Maybe a slap on the wrist, a night in the drunk tank, even though she wasn't drunk, just power drunk. But I underestimated her capacity for chaos. By evening, I got a call from Jacob. "She's already been bailed out," he said. "Didn't even spend 4 hours in booking." "Let me guess, she played the victim?" "Claims she was assaulted. Accused me of targeting her due to a familial bias, said I falsified the arrest report, and apparently called the precinct captain 5 times before she even sat down for processing. Sounds like Karen. She also said she's retaining legal counsel and plans to file an internal complaint against me. Oh, and she tried to take her mugshot photo holding a copy of the HOA charter." I sighed. "She thinks she's leading a resistance movement." Jacob paused. "You might want to prepare for more fallout." I just reviewed the full report from my body cam and noticed something odd. "You know that clipboard she dropped during the scuffle?" "Yeah." It had a printed notice of asset withholding. Looked official, stamped with HOA seal and signed by her. It claimed that the HOA had temporarily frozen your right to liquidate or relocate communal elements pending a private audit. Jesus, she really tried to fake an asset freeze? Worse, she filed that paper with the county clerk's office last week. It's not legally binding, she's not a government entity, but it got recorded into the property document system. You've got to be kidding me. Nope. And that means any background check on your house, even after the sale, will now flag a disputed HOA lien notice. Your buyers could get spooked if they find it. I felt my stomach twist. This woman had gone full scorched earth. Later that evening, I checked my email. Sure enough, there was a notice from my real estate agent. Subject line, urgent, title issue detected. The message explained that a pending community claim had triggered a flag in the title company's system. My buyers were now requesting a delay to ensure legal clarity. I called the agent directly. Can this derail the sale? It's unlikely, she said, but it might delay closing, and it might trigger renegotiation. If the buyers panic, they could walk. I slammed my hand on the counter, all because some HOA nutjob filed a fake claim. I've seen worse, she said. But yeah, this is extreme. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table in my mostly empty house, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the faint hum of my old fridge. The place no longer felt like home, just a war zone waiting for the next grenade. In the morning, I contacted a real estate attorney. She was sharp, no nonsense, and very familiar with HOA power abuse. After reviewing the document Karen filed, she confirmed it had no legal weight, but she also explained how dangerous it was in perception. It's like putting a graffiti tag on a building, she said. It doesn't make it yours, but it scares off good tenants. She filed a motion with the county to expunge the record and flagged it as fraudulent, but processing could take days, maybe longer. Meanwhile, word of the incident had spread. I got a knock at my door around midday. It was Nancy, who lived down the street. Quiet lady, maybe in her 70s, always wore floral hats and gave out wrapped cinnamon candies at the HOA meetings. She looked nervous. "Lucas, I just wanted you to know something." "Sure. There's a meeting tonight. Emergency board session. Karen's calling it from her home. Says she's still acting president until formal removal." After assaulting a police officer, Nancy gave a weak shrug. Some people still support her. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "Let me guess. She's trying to spin it." Nancy nodded. "She says you staged everything, that it was retaliation, that your son ambushed her. She's calling you a danger to the community." I laughed dryly. "Of course she is." Nancy hesitated. "I don't believe her, but others, they're scared. Or they're still under her thumb." After she left, I realized something else. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Karen was cornered now. And a cornered tyrant is worse than a reigning one. The 6th day of this slow-moving circus started with a knock on the door. Again, I half expected another neighbor nervously clutching gossip, or maybe a legal courier with some fresh HOA poison. Instead, it was a young man in a county badge and reflective vest holding a clipboard. "Mr. Bennett, that's me. I'm here from the assessor's office. We received a community complaint regarding possible unpermitted structural modifications to the residence, retaining walls, drainage adjustments, and fencing irregularities." I stared at him. "You're kidding." "No, sir. I'm just here to verify. May I take a quick look around the property?" I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I said, "Sure, knock yourself out." He was polite at least. Took photos, jotted notes, looked vaguely embarrassed the whole time. After about 15 minutes, he handed me a carbon copy of his report and apologized. "This happens sometimes," he said. "Mostly with, well, certain HOAs that treat code enforcement like a personal SWAT team." "I know exactly which one you mean." As soon as he left, I called Jacob. "Karen just weaponized the county." "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope. Sent in a complaint about fencing and drainage." "I'll make some calls," he said. "This is getting out of hand." Out of hand didn't begin to cover it. Later that afternoon, the buyer's attorney emailed me directly. They'd received an anonymous tip claiming I was involved in pending legal disputes with a neighborhood association and that the sale could be tainted by active community litigation. I responded with scanned copies of every legal document I had, including the lawyer's motion to expunge Karen's bogus claim from county records. I also attached Jacob's incident report with the official arrest notes. I shouldn't have had to do this, but I knew perception was everything. The buyers didn't walk. Not yet. But their tone had changed. Now they were considering further delay until all legal obstacles were fully resolved. Their lender wanted additional title insurance. My agent sounded exhausted. "She's playing chess," she said. "Dirty, insane chess, but still." But Karen didn't stop at county records and whisper campaigns. No, that night I got a call from Denise, the same board member who had stared at the pavement during Karen's arrest. This time, she sounded shaken. "Lucas," she said quietly, "I think it's gone too far. I think that ship sailed. She's holding emergency meetings, telling people you're suing the HOA for revenge. that your son fabricated the incident, that you're threatening neighbors to stay silent. Why are you telling me this now? There was a pause. Because she asked me to forge something. I sat up. What? She wanted me to co-sign a statement saying I saw you hit her, that she was only defending herself. I didn't respond right away. I didn't sign, she added quickly. I walked out, but Alan did. I think he's scared of her, or he believes her. I don't know. I let that settle in. Karen had gone from paperwork stunts to witness tampering. Denise, I said slowly, would you be willing to make a statement about that? Another pause. Then, yes, I'm done with her. I'll send you a notarized affidavit by tomorrow. It felt like a small crack in her armor, but it was something. The next day, Jacob came by the house in plain clothes. He brought 2 thick folders with him and dropped them on the table with a dull thud. Remember I told you this could go deeper? Yeah, it does. He opened the first folder. These are financial summaries from the HOA's bank records. I had a friend in county finance pull them. There are large disbursements labeled community projects that don't line up with any visible work. He showed me photos of unfinished lampposts, half-dug irrigation ditches, projects listed as completed on HOA records but clearly abandoned in reality. She's been funneling money, he said, slowly, quietly, but it adds up. How much? Looks like over $40,000 in the last 12 months. Most of it signed off by Karen alone. No board approvals. He opened the second folder. And this is your smoking gun, that complaint she filed with the county. It wasn't the first time. She's done this to 3 other homeowners in the last 2 years. Each one tried to leave or sell. 2 backed out and stayed. 1 caved and paid a transfer fee under the table. My blood ran cold. That's extortion. He nodded. Exactly. It was no longer just personal. Karen wasn't just vindictive. She was running a racket under the HOA's name. And now we had the paper trail. This needs to go to the prosecutor, I said. I already called, Jacob replied. They're reviewing it. And if they greenlight it, she won't be walking away this time. The following week felt like standing on the edge of a landslide, waiting for the last stone to move. My house was nearly empty. Just a few boxes stacked near the door and an air mattress I hadn't bothered to deflate. I was living in limbo, trapped between the life I was trying to leave and the nightmare that refused to end. But something had changed. I wasn't alone anymore. Jacob had formally submitted everything to the district attorney's office, the financial records, the fraudulent filings, the statement from Denise, and even the footage from the movers' phones. Denise's affidavit had arrived exactly as promised, short, direct, and devastating. It clearly stated that Karen had asked her to fabricate a claim of assault and that she feared retaliation if she refused. The prosecutor's office didn't take long to respond. I was sipping stale coffee in the kitchen when Jacob texted, "Grand jury approved the indictment. Arrest warrant being processed today." I stared at the screen for a few seconds before it sank in. She was actually going down. That afternoon, everything accelerated. I got another call, this time from a local reporter with the Colorado Gazette. "Mr. Bennett, I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment on the developing situation with the Golden Juniper Estates HOA. We've received confirmation that the HOA's president is under criminal investigation for financial misconduct and civil fraud." "Who gave you my number?" I asked. "Public records request. You filed a complaint, correct?" I hung up. I wasn't interested in being the face of the HOA resistance movement. But by the next morning, it was out in the open. Front page of the local paper. HOA president indicted for fraud, assault, and abuse of power. A glossy picture of Karen, looking smug and mid-speech at a past community BBQ, was placed right above the headline like a cautionary tale. Jacob texted me again. "They're serving the warrant now." I didn't reply. I was already on my way to the county building to finalize the last bits of paperwork for the sale. My lawyer had successfully cleared the fake lien. The buyers were still nervous, but the press had actually helped. They now saw Karen as the problem, not me. While waiting in the clerk's office, I overheard 2 women whispering by the coffee machine. She really assaulted a cop. Apparently screamed about having diplomatic immunity from an HOA. When I walked past, they recognized me. One gave a little wave, the kind you give a local legend who survived a shark attack. Outside, I ran into Denise again. She looked lighter, like someone who had been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. "She's gone," she said. "Sheriff's deputies took her out of her house this morning. Alan resigned from the board. Said he's leaving town." What happens to the HOA? Special election, probably, but no one wants the job now. They're too scared. The whole structure's collapsing. I didn't feel joy, not really, just quiet relief. But I still had one more thing to do. Later that evening, I invited Jacob over to the new place. It was still rough. Bare walls, mismatched furniture, a porch light that flickered like a horror movie prop. But it was mine. No board meetings. No fake bylaws, just silence, trees, and the occasional deer wandering through the brush. He helped me unpack the last of the boxes and tighten the bolts on the bed frame. "You think she'll actually do time?" I asked. He nodded. The DA charged her with multiple felonies, wire fraud, false filing, assault on an officer, witness tampering. That's not slap-on-the-wrist stuff. Good. Jacob looked around the living room. "You did it, old man." I raised my beer. "We did." He smiled. "She thought she could control everything. She didn't realize you'd built an escape route." I took a long drink and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, the air tasted clean. 2 months later, I found myself standing in the county courthouse. Second row, left side, dressed in my old Navy blazer that hadn't seen daylight since my wife's funeral. Jacob sat beside me, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. Across the aisle, Karen sat flanked by 2 defense attorneys, no longer smug, no longer shrieking, just diminished. Like someone who finally realized the walls weren't closing in because of paranoia, but because they were real, solid, and deserved. The courtroom was full. Neighbors, former board members, even a few reporters. A quiet tension hung in the air, like everyone was holding their breath through gritted teeth. The charges were read aloud. Assault on a law enforcement officer. Ari filing false police reports. Witness tampering. Multiple counts of fraud, including unlawful disbursement of HOA funds. Obstruction of justice. She pleaded guilty to most of them. There was no grandstanding, no last-minute rants. Just her voice, small and strangled, barely audible through the static of the room. Her lawyer tried to push for leniency, community service, restitution, probation, cited her age, her prior contributions, and emotional strain. Then the judge spoke. "I see no remorse, only calculation. You used your position to intimidate, enrich yourself, and hurt the very people you were supposed to represent. You undermined public trust, weaponized bureaucracy, and even resorted to physical violence. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern." He sentenced her to 18 months in county jail, permanent disqualification from holding any HOA or civic office, and a $45,000 restitution order to be paid to me for legal costs, disrupted property sale, and emotional distress. Karen didn't cry. She just stared forward, blinking slowly, like her mind was still trying to rewrite what had just happened. After the gavel fell, people started to rise. I didn't move, not right away. Jacob put a hand on my shoulder, firm and reassuring. We waited as the deputies led her out in cuffs. She didn't look back. Outside, the sky was that Colorado blue, so sharp it made your eyes water. Clean air, open roads, and, finally, silence. No HOA memos, no citations about invisible mold on rain gutters, no fake liens or mailbox rocks deemed communal artifacts. A week later, I received the full restitution payment from the court-managed escrow. The sale of the old house went through without issue. The buyers even sent me a thank you card saying how grateful they were for the transparency. But none of it compared to the first morning I woke up in my new place and didn't feel watched. Jacob came by that weekend. We installed a new porch light, one that didn't flicker, cooked steaks, shared beer, talked about nothing. Before he left, he laughed. She really thought calling the cops would be her trump card. She didn't know who she was calling, I said. That's the thing. I watched him drive off, the crunch of gravel fading behind the pines. Then I sat in the fading light, listening to the wind through the trees and the distant hoot of an owl. At the entrance to my new gravel driveway, I'd hung a small wooden sign. No trespassing, no HOA, no bullshit. And for the first time in years, I meant it.